Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. It is December 7th, 2024, and this is the Daily Brief. There are 1,300 Russians off the battlefield. 1,300 would otherwise sound high unless you were paying attention for the last 2 or 3 months, and it's actually a pretty low number given what the casualties have been over the last 2 or 3 months. Since September or so, the average in September of casualties was 1271, so that was lower. Average in October was 1354, so that was higher, and it's just been staying high. We're not anywhere near even the top 15. The 15th highest day of casualties was 1630, and we're at 1300, so it's a low ebb today. 17 armored fighting vehicles, 0 new tanks off the battlefield, 12 artillery systems, 49 vehicles and fuel tanks. So these numbers are like 49 as opposed to 70 or 80 as a normal day. It's quite a different day. Let's look at this. The Ukrainian Air Force shot down 7 Shahed drones last night out of 14 launched. Another 6 were suppressed by electronic warfare, and 1 drone returned to Belarus. Now, what's interesting here is that drones have been much more drones on the battlefield at night. So there would be, instead of it used to be that the Russians could put out about 16 a day. That's what they were able to manufacture. And somewhere along the way in the last few months, they were able to manufacture far more and get them out and fly them in to attack Ukraine. Okay, but these drones seem to be less effective, and part of the reason why may be this is Anton Gerashenko. Sanctions are working. A Russian strike drones are likely to go off course after replacing servo motors with Chinese ones. Okay, so part of that is the motors are having some effect on their effectiveness. This is according to the Washington Post. Sources for the publication note that technical issues with the Iranian-made Shahed 136 UAVs assembled in Russia, which Russians call Gerdes 2, have been observed this year. During sharp turns, they lose control. Some crash, others stabilize but become easy targets for Ukraine air defenses. Now, it might be likely that the cause is the replacement of the servo motor, which helps regulate drone movements in flight. At the end of 2023, due to difficulties obtaining components amid sanctions, Russians began using Chinese servo motors instead of those manufactured in South Korea. So sanctions can have an effect, no doubt about it. They don't have nearly the effect that people think that they would have, and they're constantly trying to get around the sanctions. But it looks like that might be part of why some of the drones seem to be less effective, and they're also getting better at targeting the drones as well. That's happening at the same time. Okay, Russia is using the civilian population of Ukrainian cities to improve its drone attacks and drone operator skills. Western media believe that the occupiers are experimenting with civilians in this way. This isn't new. We talked about this with the human safari some time ago, that this is actually continuing to happen and happen and happen. And it's tragic, and the world needs to wake up. Okay, now the big story last night was that there were marine drones, I mean aquatic drones that are targeting these platforms out in the sea. So they had Bayraktars overhead to capture what was going on film, and then these unmanned systems with FPV drones on them attacked these platforms which the Russians were using. It looks like the boat has 4 slots for FPV drones, each of which contains 2 FPVs, one on top of the other. Thus a boat can carry 8 FPVs. And so you see the FPV operator here with this as well. And so it was really interesting what they were actually able to do. Ukrainian naval unmanned drones attacked Russian seized gas platforms in the Black Sea near Crimea, destroying installed surveillance systems. If we look at some of the footage, though, you can see as they're approaching, these drones will actually lift up into the air, and so now you're seeing from the FPV view that they're actually like hitting from below, and it appears that they're hitting from like aerial drones as well at the same time. And so, yeah, That's pretty impressive attack on these oil platforms. And okay, so they're innovating, and everything becomes another innovation after an innovation after an innovation. You just have to keep ahead of your adversary, and it seems like they're doing it. Let's talk about the battlefield. This is the British intelligence update. Most Russian advances in recent weeks have been centered on three areas. Pokrovsk axis, and if you've been watching, you know Pokrovsk and Kharkiv are really, really important. And Velika Novosilka axis, all in Donetsk Oblast in southeastern Ukraine and closely connected. On the first, Russia has made gradual gains toward Pokrovsk, taking control of the town of Seldov and expanding the salient. Russian forces remain approximately 6 to 7 kilometers from Pokrovsk. Okay, so they're not in Pokrovsk itself. If they get Pokrovsk, that's going to be bad, and the Ukrainians really are going to have to back up, and that's going to be not so good as far as the amount of real estate that the Russians are able to capture. 6 to 7 kilometers sounds good, except once you're in 10 kilometers, you're within drone range where the drones can come and harass you and, look for human safari kind of targets. Russian forces are likely fighting within the center of Kharkiv. Kharkiv forms an important section of the front line, and its seizure would allow Russian forces to consolidate positions in the area and set conditions for further advances westward. The Ukrainian armed forces have reportedly mounted a limited counterattack in the north of Velika Novosilka, retaking the village of Novi Komar from Russian forces. Despite this, Russian efforts to cut off the supply routes from northern approach to Velika Novosilka and encircle the town continue. Russian forces are also pushing toward Velika Novosilka from the south, recently capturing the village of Bladatny. I'm slaughtering the name, I'm sure, but okay, so that's where they are. So let's actually look at this on the map, and we'll go through our incremental list again, thanks to Michael McKay. In the Zaporizhia region, the enemy attempted to advance toward these cities, and it shows 3 arrows, so I'm going to say that there's 3 attempts there. In the Kherson region, 3 enemy attacks were repelled. Near Vovchansk, 5 times they were repulsed. On the Bakhmut front, invaders attacked 5 times. Kupiansk direction, invaders attacked Ukrainian defenders 9 times. In the Lyman direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 14 attacks. Vremenka direction, 20 attacks. Kharkiv direction, invaders attacked positions of Ukrainian defenders 35 times. In the Pokrovsk direction, invaders carried out 44 assaults. So you can just see by the numbers where the intensity of the battles are. Okay. This is good news. Second batch of F-16s from Denmark have arrived in Ukraine. This is an example of leadership in defending lives that sets Denmark apart, according to Volodymyr Zelensky. Quote, the aircraft from the first batch provided by the Danish people are already intercepting Russian missiles, saving our people's lives and our infrastructure. Now our air shield has been further strengthened. If all partners were as determined, Russian terror could already have been made impossible. Okay, Denmark hands over a second batch of F-16s. Again, here's some images of this. And if we read it in Euromaidan Press, it said this: the initial delivery of F-16s occurred on 4 August when Zelensky first confirmed their arrival. At that time, he also acknowledged that the current number of aircraft and trained pilots was insufficient. The Danish Prime Minister announced that in November that Copenhagen would transfer 2 additional batches of F-16 fighters to Ukraine. The total commitment stands at 19 aircraft, underscoring Denmark's sustained military support. And so it's not a lot of aircraft, but they're still getting them, and everyone is going to help. Anton Goroshenko talked about how the Ukrainian sky looks lovely with F-16s in it. I would imagine if I was Ukrainian and I saw that flying over, I would be very comforted by that as well. Okay, yesterday, the Russians and Belarusians got together and signed an agreement, and the focus was on the deployment of these Orishnik missiles and how they're nuclear capable and that sort of thing. But the real story with that, and I talked about this yesterday in my 3 big stories became 12 yesterday. I couldn't help that. I talked about that. This was an important date, and it was an important date because yesterday, the day before yesterday, rather, Russia finally concluded, or it went into effect, the North Korea Russia, we have your back agreement. Like if North Korea is attacked, then Russia is going to be there. If Russia is attacked, North Korea will be there. Okay, but they kind of moved toward that same kind of agreement yesterday with Belarus. Not quite as firmly, but that's what's happening. And I think Russia really wants to move to a place where he's reuniting a number of these countries. If he creates an agreement with Iran like this, man, it's World War III. I mean, it's only a step away from tripping over that line into that kind of thing. Meanwhile, in Syria, the Russian Telegram channels reported that Syrian rebels have captured a missile depot in Palmyra. So this is good and bad. It's good in the sense that Assad is a bad guy and you want to get him out, and it's crippling the Russians, and that's all good. But what, and you'd say, what happens to those missiles? Do they fall into the wrong hands and get distributed? Well, they're already kind of controlled by Iran and Hezbollah, so it's already going to bad actors. It might go to new bad actors and be harder to figure out where they're going, but that's what's going on there. I talked about all the bad news for Putin in Syria yesterday. I think Assad's days are numbered from everything that I can detect at this point. And that also means it's bad for the Russians, who are going to potentially have to flee their only warm water port. Okay, drones. I just love these drones, and just the hits keep coming with little drones knocking down much bigger, much more expensive Russian reconnaissance drones. It's just awesome, and the innovation with drones is incredible. All right, last couple things. Okay, I keep telling you this for the last few days. Now I'll stop doing that after a little bit. I just want to make everyone aware, out on Spotify, a number of you have said, thank you. I listen to you in my car on the way to work. This is a better platform. Fine, no problem. Either way, whatever will help you understand the news and be able to digest it and listen, great. And if you can spread the message, all the better. Thank you so much for listening on Spotify. Today is December 7th. And in December 7th, 1941 is a day that, according to President Roosevelt, will live in infamy. It's a day that the Japanese attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. It was a sucker punch. They didn't know what was coming. War had not been declared until they declared war by attacking. So what's interesting to my mind is just how much the world has changed, where the Russians, who were part of the Allies with the United Kingdom and what was left of France and the United States, they were on the same team. And then the Japanese, who are the bad guys, are actually, we need the Japanese to be in the fold, to be here to defend against China, who is one of the good guys, who's now one of the potential bad guys. And it's so convoluted, but what a difference some time makes. And yeah, okay, that's where we were then. And then I saw this meme and this is an older meme. It's from June 13th of Russian drones, and Putin's looking at this as the Black Sea Fleet. He's sitting in the bathtub looking at it, and the Black Sea Fleet is sinking. Well, those Ukrainian drones are wreaking havoc still, and they're innovating, and that's what's the big story here today. So, all right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes, and thank you more than anything for being the kind of people that care about Ukraine.